Pisces. Sometimes life feels like the ocean right before sunrise. Everything seems quieter than usual, fewer clear signals, fewer movements strong enough to make you certain you're moving forward. And in moments like that, many people start to wonder, am I really on the right path, or am I just standing still while life keeps flowing around me? Something I've noticed after years of listening to people's stories is that not every quiet season is empty. Sometimes it's simply the moment when life is rearranging pieces you haven't had the chance to see yet. If lately you've felt your pace slowing down, maybe you'll want to stay here a little longer, because what comes next begins inside those moments that only seem still on the surface. Pisces. There are seasons in life when your rhythm suddenly slows down in a way that feels unfamiliar. Not like everything stops, just the noise fades a little, signals become less obvious. Answers that once felt easy to find start to blur, like the surface of the ocean before the sun fully rises. I've always felt those moments can be a little uncomfortable, but also very real, because when the outside world gets quiet, you start to hear the questions inside you more clearly. Maybe lately you've found yourself sitting alone for long stretches of time, not because you're sad, just because you're thinking more than usual. You look back at the roads you've walked, the choices you once believed were right, the dreams that used to make your heart beat faster. And then, a very human question shows up. Am I moving in the right direction, or am I just trying not to stop? If you've ever felt that way, I don't think you're alone in it. After hearing so many life stories over the years, one thing has stood out to me. Life doesn't always grow in straight lines. Some of the most important seasons look like nothing is happening at all, like a seed resting under the soil. From the outside, nothing seems different, but underneath, everything is quietly unfolding. Pisces often lives very deeply in the emotional world. You notice small shifts that other people might never pick up on, and sometimes that can make you feel like you're moving slower than everyone else. But I've come to feel this. Moving slower doesn't mean you're lost. Sometimes, slower simply means you're listening more closely. Maybe you're learning not to react immediately, learning not to chase every opportunity that appears, learning to tell the difference between what truly matters and what is simply loud. These quieter seasons can make people uneasy because we're used to measuring progress by speed, by achievements, by milestones you can clearly point to. But some kinds of growth don't make any sound. No fireworks, no dramatic turning point. Just one day you realize you respond differently than you used to. You feel a little less afraid, a little less dependent on outside approval. You start to feel okay, even without having every answer yet. And in a very gentle way, life begins to shift from there. Silence is not always a sign that you're losing direction. Sometimes it's simply the moment when things are being rearranged in ways you can't see yet. Like backstage at a theater, the audience sees the lights go dark, but behind the curtain, everything is being prepared for the next scene. If lately you've felt your pace slowing down, maybe that isn't something negative. Maybe it's just a transition chapter you're walking through. And maybe, from these quiet spaces, you'll begin to notice a different version of yourself. A calmer version, a clearer version, and maybe a more honest one. Because sometimes, the real journey doesn't begin when everything speeds up. It begins when you're willing to pause long enough to hear where your heart is trying to lead you. And that is often where the real story quietly begins. Pisces. If there's one kind of growth that often goes unnoticed, it may be the way you change. No spotlight, no need for attention, no need for the world to recognize that you're trying. Many times, your most important changes happen quietly, and no one sees the moment you decide not to return to an old habit. No one hears the first time you say no to something that drains you. No one really knows how long it took for you to learn how to treat yourself with more kindness. And sometimes, that can make you wonder, is what I'm doing actually making a difference? I don't think answers like that always show up right away, because inner change often works like underwater currents beneath the ocean. You can't see them, but over time, they reshape the entire shoreline. Pisces often experiences the world on a deeper emotional level than most. You naturally place yourself in someone else's position. You hold on to stories, emotions, sometimes even pain that was never fully yours to carry. And then, at some point, you begin learning how to release a little more. Not because you've become cold, but because you start to understand the heart needs protection too. Maybe lately, you've started setting clearer boundaries, not answering messages right away, not trying to please everyone, not over-explaining who you are. Those things may look small from the outside, but for someone who spent a long time putting others first, that's a powerful step forward. Healing rarely arrives in dramatic ways. It's not always a sudden awakening moment. Sometimes it's simply realizing you don't react the way you used to. A sentence that once hurt you deeply now just makes you pause and let it go. An old memory that once kept you awake at night now feels distant, not erased, just quieter. Not everyone will notice those kinds of changes, and sometimes even you might forget how far you've actually come. Pisces often underestimates its own quiet progress. You're used to looking at big moments, clear achievements, visible milestones, but many of the strongest foundations are built in silence, like roots growing deep underground before a tree ever reaches toward the sky. No one takes photos of roots, no one applauds that process, but without it, nothing above ground could stay standing. If lately you've felt like you're only changing on the inside, that may be far more meaningful than you realize. Maybe you're learning how to live more honestly with yourself, learning to listen to your inner guidance instead of only following outside expectations, learning to choose what brings you peace instead of what brings approval. And changes like that rarely arrive with fireworks. They come quietly, deeply, and truthfully. Maybe the world hasn't noticed the difference in you yet, but that doesn't mean the difference isn't real, because sometimes the most important journeys are the ones no one else ever sees, except you. And maybe these quiet shifts are becoming the foundation for a version of life you once didn't even dare imagine. And from that foundation, your story may begin moving into a very different chapter. And as the changes inside you begin to settle, sometimes life will gently place something in front of you that's hard to name. A feeling that a certain chapter is slowly coming to a close. There isn't always a big moment to mark it. There isn't always a clear goodbye. Sometimes it's simply something familiar that no longer feels like it fits the way it used to. Maybe you notice you don't think the same way anymore. Guess things that once made you anxious now feel like distant echoes. Goals that once pushed you to run at full speed now make you pause and ask if they truly belong to you. And if you're in a season like that, I think that's a deeply human experience. Because growth rarely begins by adding more. It often begins by letting go. Letting go of an old belief that you had to be perfect. Letting go of a role you tried to hold just to avoid disappointing someone. Letting go of a version of yourself you once needed, but may not need anymore. Pisces often forms deep connections to memories and emotions. You remember how things once made you feel. You hold on to stories, people, promises, longer than most. And that isn't wrong. It simply means your heart works deeply. But sometimes, because you feel so deeply, you may also carry things that have already completed their purpose in your life. A relationship that once meant everything. A dream that helped you survive a difficult time. A way of seeing the world that once made you feel safe. And then, at some point, you begin to feel like you've outgrown those things. Not in an arrogant way, just in a natural way. Like putting on a shirt that once fit perfectly, and realizing it doesn't feel comfortable anymore. Moments like this often come with quiet inner conflict. One part of you wants to keep everything the same. Another part is slowly facing forward. And maybe that's where many people feel the most confused, because not every ending looks like an ending. Some endings arrive very gently. No arguments, no drama, just a shift in energy, like the tide pulling back. You don't hear a loud sound, but if you look again after some time, the shoreline has changed. Maybe you speak less now. Choose relationships more carefully, or simply, you don't want to return to places that made you feel like you had to shrink yourself. And if that's happening, maybe you aren't losing anything. Maybe you're just creating space for something that fits you better. I've always felt that letting go is rarely a sign of failure. Many times, it's a sign of honesty with yourself. Because when you allow a chapter to close, you're admitting you've changed. that you've learned something, that you don't need to hold on to everything just to prove that you're strong. Pisces, sometimes courage isn't about holding tighter. Next, sometimes it's about being gentle enough with yourself to say, I think I've reached the end of this part of the road, and maybe you don't know what the next chapter will look like yet. Maybe you're still standing between the old and the new, but sometimes that in-between space is where people become the most honest with themselves. And maybe when a cycle closes quietly, you're preparing to step into a season where you don't have to push yourself just to survive anymore, where you can simply be who you are. And after you've moved through seasons that asked you to think deeply, to let go, to face the most honest parts of yourself, there often comes a moment when you begin to notice a very subtle shift. Life doesn't suddenly become easy, but that feeling of being out of sync inside you starts to soften. You begin making decisions a little faster than before, not because you're certain of the outcome, but because you understand more clearly what actually fits you. Pisces often carries a very wide inner world, and when that inner space becomes less chaotic, you may feel a very specific kind of calm, not surface-level happiness, but something deeper. A quiet sense of, I'm standing where I'm supposed to be. And something interesting begins to happen. When you stop trying to force life to unfold in a specific way, you start noticing more options around you. Maybe it's a very ordinary conversation, but it makes you think in a completely new direction. Maybe it's a small opportunity, but it fits the person you are today, not the person you were years ago. Maybe it's an idea that shows up during a very normal evening, and you realize you're mature enough now to turn it into something real. Changes like this rarely arrive like a lightning strike moment. They feel more like slow realizations. You begin to notice. You don't react from old patterns anymore. You think more carefully before saying yes. You step away more easily from places that drain your energy. You begin choosing environments where you can breathe deeply, instead of constantly bracing yourself just to get through the day. And sometimes, balance doesn't come because everything around you changes. It comes because you stop trying to become who you think other people want you to be. I've always felt this is a very quiet kind of growth. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. You don't need to over-explain the path you're choosing. You simply live closer to who you truly are. From the outside, nothing may look dramatic, but inside, you know you're standing stronger than you used to. And from that place, you begin to see the world differently. You feel less drawn to things that only offer temporary hussies. You start caring more about what brings stability in your emotions, in your values, in the way you want to live. Maybe lately, you've noticed you're not chasing every opportunity anymore. You choose more carefully. You slow down to observe. You listen to your real feelings before you move forward. And sometimes, that slower pace helps you move in a truer direction. Balance is not when life becomes perfect. It's when you become steady enough to walk through uncertain days without losing yourself. If you're in this kind of season, you may begin to realize something. Some doors don't need to be forced open. They open when you're ready to walk through them. And as you begin living closer to who you truly are, there may be moments when you notice something unexpected. Not everything that leaves your life is a loss. Some things, when they stay too long, can quietly keep you from moving forward. Not because they were bad, just because they no longer belong to who you are today. Pisces often carries a very rare kind of awareness. You see meaning in things others might overlook. You remember emotions connected to people, memories, small promises that no one else may even recall. And because you feel so deeply, you may also hold on to things that have already completed their purpose in your life. A relationship that once helped you grow, a job that once made you feel safe, a dream that once carried you through a difficult season. None of those things were wrong. None of them were meaningless. Sometimes, they were simply meant to walk beside you during a certain chapter. And then, one day, you begin to feel like you're stepping out of that chapter. These moments are rarely obvious. There isn't always a major decision. Often it's just a quiet feeling that you no longer see yourself inside the old story. And if you've ever felt guilty for wanting to let something go, that feeling makes sense, because when you live from the heart, leaving can sometimes feel like you're betraying your own past. But over time, I've come to understand something very simple. Growth is not about holding on to everything. It's about knowing what deserves to be honored and what deserves to be set down gently. Letting go is not always slamming a door shut. Sometimes it's simply stopping yourself from holding a door open when you already know you don't want to walk through it anymore. And something else happens when you let go. You don't just move away from something old. You create space for new experiences to find their way to you, like cleaning out a room. At first it may feel emptier, but that empty space allows more light to come in. Pisces often feels uneasy with emptiness because emptiness forces you to face uncertainty, to face the question, what comes next? But sometimes, emptiness isn't a sign that you're lost. It's simply the pause between two chapters. And inside that pause, you have a chance to hear yourself more clearly. You may begin to notice what truly makes you feel alive, what brings you peace, even when no one else is watching. If lately you've been moving away from something, a person, an environment, a way of seeing yourself, maybe that doesn't mean you're losing a piece of your life. Maybe you're choosing to move closer to the most honest version of who you are. I've always felt that real courage is not about holding on to everything. It's about being gentle enough with yourself to admit, I've learned what I needed to learn here. And from that moment, you don't leave with regret. You leave with gratitude. Gratitude that it once existed. Gratitude for who you were during that time. And gratitude that now, you're strong enough to keep going. Because sometimes what you let go of is not something you lose. It's something that has completed its role, so you can continue becoming the person you're slowly growing into. And as you begin to set down what no longer fits your life, sometimes something very subtle begins to appear. Not an intense rush of excitement, not the feeling that you have to run and grab something before it disappears. Just a kind of peace you may not have noticed before. Pisces often experiences the world very deeply. Because of that, you can easily be pulled toward things that create strong emotions, intense relationships, opportunities that make you feel like you have to say yes immediately. But as you grow emotionally, you may begin to notice something very different. The beginnings that truly last often feel like you can finally breathe deeper. You don't have to perform as someone else. You don't have to try to be more interesting, more impressive, or stronger just to be accepted. You simply get to be yourself. Maybe it's when you're with someone and you don't have to analyze every word you say, or when you step into an environment where you don't feel like you have to shrink to fit in. Maybe it's when you begin doing something, not because it impresses others, but because it feels true to who you are. These kinds of beginnings rarely feel like the biggest turning point of your life. They often start very normally, but over time, you realize they make you feel steadier, stronger inside, and more real. Pisces often carries a very quiet fear, the fear of not being good enough and being left behind, the fear that you have to change yourself to keep the things you love. But at some point, you may begin to see a very gentle truth. You don't have to become a more perfect version of yourself to be worthy of love. You don't have to prove your value by sacrificing who you are. Maybe you've been enough, in your own unique way, for a very long time. And when you begin to believe that, even just a little, you start choosing different paths. You choose relationships where you are respected. You choose opportunities that don't require you to trade away your peace. You choose dreams that make you feel alive, not just like you're doing the right thing. Strong, lasting beginnings rarely rush. They take time to grow, time for you to understand what you're stepping into. And sometimes, the most beautiful thing isn't achieving something quickly. It's building something that can stay with you for a very long time. If lately you don't feel drawn to flashy, surface-level things, that may not mean you're losing your passion. Maybe you're learning how to choose what makes you feel safe being yourself. And sometimes, the most important moment is not when you receive a huge opportunity. It's when you look at your own life and realize you no longer feel like you have to fight just to exist inside it. And from that place, new beginnings often don't arrive as tests. They arrive like a very gentle invitation, inviting you into a life where you don't have to struggle to be worthy of it. And as you begin moving into deeper stages of emotional growth, you may start to notice a very personal kind of signal. not coming completely from logic, not coming from other people's advice, but from a feeling that is very deep, very still, and somehow very clear. Pisces is often described as having a rich inner world. You can sense the atmosphere of a room within seconds of walking in. You can notice small shifts in the way someone speaks to you. You can feel when something is off, even before anyone says a word. And what makes this unique is, this awareness doesn't always arrive as a clear thought. Many times, it feels like a gentle pull guiding you in a certain direction. A feeling that makes you want to try a new path, to step away from a familiar environment, or simply to slow down. So you can hear what's happening inside you. Earlier in life, you may have doubted those feelings. You may have wondered if you were too sensitive, if you were overthinking everything. But over time, many people begin to notice that these inner signals don't usually appear by accident. They often show up after you've lived enough, felt enough, and learned enough to understand yourself more clearly. Not to control every part of your life, just to help you recognize what actually feels right for who you are. Maybe lately, you feel drawn to things you never considered before. A new direction, a new way of living, or a way of seeing the world that feels lighter inside your chest. Maybe you're starting to feel uncomfortable in environments that once felt normal, not because they changed, but because you changed. And moments like that can feel unsettling, because you can't always explain them with logic. But growth is rarely about knowing everything in advance. Sometimes growth is learning how to listen to yourself, even when you don't have all the answers. Pisces often looks for outside confirmation before trusting inner feelings. But at some point, you may begin to realize your inner voice deserves to be heard too. Not to replace logic, but to stand beside it as part of how you make decisions. If lately you've felt a very quiet urge, an urge to try something new, an urge to step into a different chapter, an urge to live more honestly with your emotions, maybe that isn't random. Maybe it's a sign you're understanding yourself on a deeper level. You're beginning to know what brings you peace, and what forces you to brace yourself just to get through life. And sometimes, the biggest step in growing up is not finding the perfect path. It's realizing you can trust yourself to walk through life's crossroads, not by knowing everything ahead of time, but by being honest enough to listen to the truest voice inside you. And maybe those quiet, subtle feelings are guiding you closer to the version of yourself that has always felt like home. And after you've moved through enough seasons that asked you to change, to stand on your own, to truly understand yourself, a very different kind of challenge often appears. Not the challenge of surviving something hard, but the challenge of allowing yourself to receive the kindness life offers you. Many people believe that chasing a good life is the hardest part. But sometimes what holds people back the most is the feeling that they don't fully deserve that peace. Pisces often gives so much of themselves. You're used to listening, understanding, standing beside others during the moments they need someone most. And sometimes, you forget that you deserve to be treated gently too. Some people grow up believing they have to become better first before they're allowed to be happy, stronger, more successful, closer to perfect. But over time, many people begin to see something very simple. The value of a person is not something that has to be earned piece by piece. If lately life has started to feel softer toward you, your first reaction may not always be joy. Sometimes it's hesitation. You wonder if it will last. You wonder if you're too lucky. You wonder if you missed something along the way. Those feelings are very human, because when you're used to protecting yourself, opening your heart to good things can also take courage. Allowing yourself to feel peace can sometimes feel as hard as walking through a storm. But maybe, part of growing up is learning not to walk away when life starts treating you kindly, not doubting every moment of joy, not rushing to search for signs that everything is about to fall apart, just allowing yourself to experience those good moments fully. Pisces, maybe you don't see the entire picture of your life yet. Maybe there are still roads you haven't walked, answers you don't have yet. But if you've moved through seasons that made you stronger inside, if you've learned how to stand up again after disappointment, if you still carry kindness, empathy, and the ability to see good in other people, then maybe you've come much farther than you realize. And maybe what you're searching for isn't a perfect moment, isn't a life without challenges. Maybe it's a life where you can be yourself without asking permission. A life where you don't have to prove your worth by sacrificing who you are. A life where you can be strong and soft at the same time. If there is one thing I would want you to remember after all of this, maybe it's this. You don't have to become someone else to deserve a kind life. You don't have to reach some perfect version of yourself to be allowed to live in peace. And sometimes, the biggest step forward in life is simply allowing yourself to receive good things, without feeling like you have to lose yourself to keep them. Maybe the road ahead still holds many unknowns, but if you keep walking with honesty, kindness, and respect for yourself, then maybe you're moving little by little, closer to the life you once quietly hoped could become real. And maybe, the moment you allow yourself to receive something good is the exact moment a new chapter begins to open in your life.